Eskom has asked the National Energy Regulator of South Africa for a whopping 36% increase in electricity tariffs for the 2025 financial year. This will be followed by 12% for the 26-27 financial year and an increase of 9% for 2027-28 financial year. If approved, the price hike will allow the power utility to collect 446 billion rand in revenue in 2026, 495 billion rand for 2027 and 537 billion rand for 2028. NERSA is calling for public comment, with the closing date for the submission of written comments being 4 p.m. on the 1st of November. Eskom Chief Financial Officer Khalib Kasim has highlighted that the cost of electricity may be out of reach for vulnerable sectors of society.
There's the terminology that is used with regard to a debt spiral. As the price goes up further, we'll get less and less consumers staying on the grid, and also the payment, the non-payment will increase. But at the end of the day, Leanne, it does cost in generating that electricity. Eskom procures its services via fundamentally open tender processes. Those come through, and if I take, for example, our biggest cost item, coal, effectively for the first year, all of that is already contracted as we went through a open tender process. So those are costs that are committed to, that we have to recover. If through the regulatory decision, there's an amount that is disallowed from the regulator, we still have to pay the coal suppliers the amount, and then we will have to find that shortfall. And currently, we're not allowed to borrow in terms of the debt relief, and the debt relief is used to pay interest costs and capital. You can't use it for operating costs, which by implication means it leaves Eskom in an awkward position to decide which operating costs to incur and which ones to stop, or alternatively, deliver on your operating costs and slow down your capital expenditure, which will come back at a later stage with devastating implications into the sustainability of our asset base. So it is trade-offs in which we find ourselves as Eskom, but we need to do it in conjunction with working with government. How do we deal with the municipalities? Yes, we understand in NERSA making the tariff decision, there needs to be mechanisms, Leanne, to protect the vulnerable sectors, be it commercial and industrial, as well as poor residential consumers. Those mechanisms need to be transparent to the South African public, that everyone understands how you're going to cushion those sectors.
Right, let's bring in some reaction. Speaking to Mthunzi Luthuli, who's an energy analyst. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. What should we make of this request by Eskom? Is it a matter of being greedy, or is it taking up an opportunity at a time where South Africans are finally getting some of the lights on and really having some confidence that Eskom can deliver?
Good evening.
Okay. Perhaps let me hold you there. I think we're going to have to re-establish the connection. Mthunzi Luthuli, who's energy analyst, they're trying to expand on Eskom's request to NERSA. We will go back to him in just a moment. Okay, Mthunzi, I hope that the line is more stable. Just getting a sense of your interpretation of what is really going on.
Yes. It looks like the line is better now.
Yeah.
Look, I think there needs to be an investigation to see why it is that Eskom needs these kinds of revenues to run their business. We're talking in the region of 500 billion rands, okay? And still, by the way, Eskom makes losses, even with the kinds of revenues that they are requesting, okay? If you look at the electricity prices from 2007 up to 2022, 2023, the electricity prices went up by round about 800%. It's just ridiculous. And on top of that, they continue to request, annual increases of 36%. It's crazy. Something needs to be looked at.
So when it comes to looking at the numbers, I mean, how would Eskom justify this? Is this an indication of how it's been cash-strapped, or its key financial indications are showing that the money is needed by the power utility?
I don't know how Eskom will justify this. I don't think, in fact, it's possible to advance any sensible justification for these kinds of increases. In my view, there are other things at play here. To be honest, what I think is happening is that this whole thing is political and is driven by economics and the deregulation of the electricity sector. What I think is happening is that the powers that be have been lobbied to increase the prices of electricity so that when private players come into the market, they can make healthy profits. This is what I think is happening here. It's not something that is driven by, normal economics. Definitely not. That's what I think is happening. And unfortunately, the South African economy, the South African businesses, and the poor consumer is going to be paying for this political and economic plot.
Yeah, because many have argued that the cost of electricity will be out of reach for vulnerable sectors of society. Then what?
Yeah, it will definitely be out of reach. And what that will do is that it will result in political instability. And it's very unwise for Eskom and for government to move in this direction, because you will definitely get social and political instability. But over and above that, high electricity prices affect businesses. They make the cost of running businesses higher, which means that you limit the ability of businesses to grow, you limit the ability of businesses to employ more people, and you make your businesses or their products uncompetitive in the marketplace. So it affects all sectors of society and all sectors of the economy. We really need to put a handle on this and stop these ridiculous price increases by Eskom.
What some have argued is that Eskom's essential problem perhaps lies in its mismanagement of its huge construction efforts, the Medupi and the Kusile coal-fired power projects. What is your view?
My view is that that's definitely part of the problem. By the time Kusile is completed, it will be costing twice what it was initially budgeted for. That's ridiculous. The second issue, though, in my view, is that we have to look at the primary energy costs of Eskom. Okay, the primary energy costs are by far the biggest single cost item on Eskom's income statement. Now, and that's mainly coal procurement. We need to look at these coal procurement contracts. Who gets paid how much? And are those prices that they get paid not exorbitant? Maybe they are. We need more transparency on the cost structure of Eskom, who is being paid what and why.
Yeah. And as we speak about the probabilities, you've just made mention of the big impact that this will have on the entire ecosystem, from business to consumers. But the other question, of course, is around what this will lead consumers towards when it comes to options of going off the grid. I mean, that will also increase. And then then the plan doesn't go as planned for the big demand.
Yeah. Okay. So those that can go off the grid obviously will, and if it's beneficial to them, they will do so. Unfortunately, most poor households will not be able to go off grid. So they will continue to be subjected to these high electricity prices, and they are the people that can least afford these prices. So that's a problem. But the other implication of going off grid is that, especially when you use renewables to go off grid, is that there are times when renewables are not generating power. The question is what happens during those periods. In those periods, Eskom is then would be required to then come in and fill in the gap, which means that Eskom will act as a battery to the country, a battery on standby. If things don't go right, or the sun is not shining, or whatever, it's snowing, then Eskom must generate. But for Eskom to be on standby in that sense costs a lot of money, and people would be paying a high price per unit for that kind of electricity, because now you're looking at almost emergency tariffs. That's the other problem.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
And then, of course, you would have stranded assets lying around everywhere in the country. That's another big problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and that analysis. Speaking there to Mthunzi Luthuli, who's an energy analyst, helping us make sense of Eskom having asked the National Energy Regulator of South Africa for a whopping 36% increase in electricity tariffs come 2025.